So before we begin, we do have translation available in Portuguese and Spanish. I'm just going to have Adriana introduce herself.
Boa noite, meu nome é Adriana Fernandes, eu estou aqui para ajudar com interpretação em português ou espanhol. Se alguém precisar de ajuda, por favor. Obrigada.
Thanks, Adriana.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jesse Klingon, the Ward 4 Councilman. Welcome to Ward 4's Fall ResiStat meeting. What a great turnout. It's good to see this much community engagement. I hope every ResiStat will be so well attended. I'm not going to say much. This is my time to listen. I want to hear what the updates from the city are. I know there's a lot of discussion around Broadway, around the bus lane. I know that's why a lot of you are here. The only thing I can say to that is that there will be more discussion. My colleague, Councilor at Large Hirsch, and I put in an order tonight, we're going to put an order for tonight, asking for a public hearing so that you all can be heard. So that will most likely be happening in the near future. That said, I'm just going to turn it right over to, I know that they rearranged the order of things so that the mobility stuff will be first, because we know that there's a lot of energy, a lot of frustration around the Broadway situation. So we wanted to get to that right away. I and most of my colleagues here have to attend the council meeting at 7, so we're only here for about 20 minutes or so. But with that, I would like to, we want to introduce, I don't know if Stephanie wanted to say something quickly. Okay, so we have my colleague at large, Councilor Stephanie Hirsch, my colleague at large, Will Mba is here, colleague at large, Bill White is here, and I know that Stephanie really wanted to say something, so I told her we would allow her for a minute to address you all. So with that, after that, we'll be passing it off to Brad. Thank you all for coming, and keep the feedback coming, and hopefully we get some good updates on everything happening in Ward 4, Star Market. I think Sue's going to have some sort of update on Star Market. I asked for that. And Healey School and all the whole bit. So with that, here's Stephanie.
Thank you. Just to say that I wanted to come and let people know that I've heard so much from this neighborhood about the concerns and the pain you're experiencing about the transition to the bus lanes. I don't know for sure what the solution is, but I hope that we can do a better job of listening to what you're experiencing, both with this decision and with future decisions, and find some kind of compromise. And just wanted to let you know that I hear you, and your voice should matter with the projects that happen in your own neighborhood.
All right, good evening. My name is Taylor Coe. I'm the ResiStat coordinator for the city. We're really excited to have you all here with us this evening. If you do have a copy of the slides with you, there is a copy of the agenda. We are going to be covering a lot of different topics this evening. We won't be doing too deep of a dive into any specific topic, but we do hope to take your questions. We do ask that you try to hold questions till the end of each section or topic. And we will also have staff here available after the meetings to answer your questions as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Captain Donovan, and he's going to talk about crime in the ward and in the city.
I am not Brad Rawson, but Brad will be coming right after me. So my name is Jim Donovan. I'm your patrol captain with the Somerville Police Department. I supervise all the men and women you see in uniform, with the exception of the Traffic Bureau. Chief Fallon wanted to be here tonight, but he had another meeting, another engagement. He assured me he's going to try to get here, so if he gets here, I'll pass it off to him. But we don't have many slides tonight. We're going to hit on some high points, and we're going to move on. I have a special affinity for Ward 4. As a patrol officer, this was my ward. You know, I chose to work in Ward 4. I love Ward 4. I love the community, the restaurants, and everything that comes along with it. So I do have a special attachment to Ward 4. Don't tell the other 6 wards, please. So to start off, we're going to touch on some quick crime slides. As you can see, index crime decreased 2% over 1 year and 3% over 2. Just to explain what index crimes are the crimes we report to the FBI. Every law enforcement agency across the country reports the same statistics. It involves property crime as well as violent crime. So I believe it's 8 crimes, 4 property crimes, and 4 violent crimes. As you'll see in Ward 4, index crimes increased 18% over 1 year, and that was due to a spike in car breaks. We tracked it back to car breaks. As you'll see, index crimes decreased 13% over 2 years, and we expect when we come to you again in the spring to see that decrease go back because of the change in the car brakes. Luckily, violent crime, as you'll see, violent crime index crime for Ward 4 decreased 32% over 1 year and 38% over 2 years, which is phenomenal. That's a crazy decrease for us. Car brake prevention, we always tell people, we get people that call us all the time to report their car brakes, and they're like, well, my doors were locked. And, you know, to people's surprise, there is no magic door opener for cars. 99% of people left their cars open. So we just ask people to help us. You know, lock your car doors. And the other thing is report car brakes. I'll go to these neighborhood meetings and people will say, you know, Captain Donovan, we had a string of brakes on our street the other night. And I look at the crime stats and the crime data almost every morning when I have time, and I'll say, I didn't see that. And they're like, well, not everyone reported it. We don't have a crystal ball. Help us. If you report the crime data, I look at it, I deploy the officers where the crime's occurring. So share that information with us. No crime is too small to report. Call us. We're your police department. We did see an increase in bike theft in the last 6 months. And on the left-hand side, you'll see some takeaways. As far as similar to motor vehicles, we ask everyone, you know, lock your bikes up. Lock them to a fixed object. Be wary of cable locks that are easy to cut with the wire, those really flimsy locks you can buy. Never lock your bike to a wooden post that can be broken. I don't know if anyone saw the video recently in the news. It was at the T-station in Davis Square. Someone locked their bike to a structure, and all you had to do is pick the structure up and push the cord down and walk away with the bike. We ask take bikes indoors overnight if possible. If not, store somewhere with low street visibility. So when someone's walking by your house, they don't see the bikes on the front porch or kind of leaning against the side of the house like my 4 sons' bikes are tonight. Right there, keep on file bike serial numbers and photos. We always ask people when high-priced bikes are stolen to help us out and check local, like Craigslist, you know, eBay. There's those other kind of neighborhood secondhand places we ask people to check on as well. So if you have a photo of your bike, especially bike serial numbers are very, very helpful for us. As far as the efforts we undertook to combat the bike thefts, the chief assigned a sergeant to oversee bike theft investigations. I don't want to get too much into what kind of tactics we used. You know, they are kind of advanced, and you know, some things some secrets we don't want to share because we don't know who's necessarily in the room all the time, or we're being recorded tonight so they can be watching the tactics we use. But we did prioritize suspect identification and bike recovery. We do know, you know, who our previous bike theft suspects are, and you know, there's people within Somerville who we know in the past have stolen bikes, so we focus some of our efforts on them. We analyze temporal and geographical patterns. Like in the previous screen, we showed you where the thefts occurred. We look at where the thefts are occurring, and that's where we deploy our people. It's not rocket science. We use the data. Neighborhood police officers and area cars are deployed based on that information. So our neighborhood officers, 1 per ward, and your area cars, especially car 4, we deploy them based on that data. Increased resident awareness and crime prevention, which is left-hand screen. You know, the chief found is huge on community engagement. You know, we recognize one of the most important things for police officers, our first interaction should be a positive one. I tell my officers that all the time. If your first interaction, you know, most people don't interact with police, and if they do, it's maybe once in their lives, really. I mean, you may see someone here, but in the furtherance of their duties, you may interact with a police officer once in your life. If that's a negative interaction, that's what you're going to carry for the rest of your life, and that's what you're going to share with your inner circle. We want that interaction to be a positive one. You know, in that vein, the chief instituted these initiatives over the summer. The first is a basketball clinic for Somerville youth. We ran it out here for a few nights, and it just got too hot, so we brought it down to the Agenziano School. Extremely well attended. Extremely well attended. I think we're doing another one right now as we speak. We had 2 or 3 officers assigned to it. One officer was Officer Beckford, Somerville High graduate. If you ask him, he's a shot block leader, holds a shot block record at Somerville High, although I don't know if they even keep that stat. But, and he's also he played Division III college basketball as well. On the bottom there is the Junior Police Academy. This is our 2nd time running this. We ran it last summer. It was so successful. We had 2 classes this week. And we run it as you would in the beginning as a normal police academy. One of our officers comes in, he's all spit polished, and he comes in very military and has everyone line up so the kids get to see kind of what a police academy is like. And then we break it down a little bit and have some more fun. You know, some of the things they did, they get introduced to District Attorney Marion Ryan. She did a presentation. They went through the National Guard Fitness Challenge, learned some CPR training. Cataldo helped out with that, Cataldo Ambulance. Our K9, your K9, I did a presentation for them, and we worked on team building and some physical fitness. Very, very well attended, very popular, and we're doing it again next summer. Kind of close out at some of our accomplishments at the police department. For the first time in the history of the Somerville Police, we're accredited police department. Huge undertaking for a police department our size. If you look at the accredited departments on the Mass Accreditation website, there are very few departments our size accredited. Maybe one, maybe two. A lot of them are smaller departments or college departments. And what it is there's a set of standards set by the Mass Accreditation Commission. And you have to meet beat those standards. And they're the gold standard. We talk about some of the things here. It's, emergency response and planning, your infrastructure, your training, your communications, property and evidence handling, use of force, vehicle pursuits, everything you possibly imagine is gone over with a fine-tooth comb to make sure we're the gold standard, the standard within our industry. All of our policies are online now. So if you have a question as to some police department policy, you can go on our website and you can see all the policies we operate under. And our last slide here, we always end with this slide, recognizing mental health crisis in the city and the opioid crisis. It's just different contacts and organizations that we correspond with that can help people if they're in mental health crisis or addiction crisis. And also, as the chief always mentions during the presentation, I shouldn't forget it, is that we instituted the CORE program, and it stands for Community Outreach and Harm Reduction. In the lobby of the police department, we have 2 licensed clinicians and a recovery coach. They work hand in hand with our officers every single day, combing through all the calls, finding people on calls that are suffering from mental illness or addiction problems, and they reach out to them. If they want help, we're there to help them. Sometimes they don't want help the first time, the second time, the third time, we keep trying. It's a program we put in place, I think probably Chief Fallon did when he took over, so it's 5 years, probably about 4 years in. And if you look around in different communities, Medford included, they're doing it now too, and they're following our lead. I'll take any questions if anyone has questions, but I will be here all night and to answer any questions you may have. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Say you don't want them hanging around, putting in your garage yet. I can go up the street and see about 10 of them, and you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. We have, in Somerville especially, we have a high population of college students, right? So we're near Tufts, we're near Harvard, MIT, Lesley, and that's their method of transport. I know that my office is in West Somerville. I work close with Tufts because they're in our community, and we communicate with their incoming freshmen. Like, listen, if you're a cyclist, secure your bikes. Because we don't want our stats to go up. We want our stats to go down. So, anyone else? I'm going to hand off to Brad. Like I said, the chief's coming. I'll be here all night. I'll take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Captain. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Brad Rawson. I'm a Somerville resident, and I serve the city as Director of Mobility. The team that I lead in the mayor's office is also responsible for parks planning and for urban forestry. So anybody who's been involved with the great schoolyard projects that we've done, like the Winter Hill Community School or the Healey Schoolyard, that's part of our team as well. And I'll introduce Adam Polinsky from our office as well. Adam.
Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Polinsky. I was a Ward 4 resident for the last 3.5 years. However, I did unfortunately move to Ward 6 in September. But Ward 4 does hold a special place in my heart. I'm the city's transportation analyst, and I work on Brad's team.
So before we talk about Broadway, we had a community meeting about 5 weeks ago to talk about the recent fatal pedestrian crashes. There have been 2 hit-and-run crashes that have taken our residents, and we wanted to make sure that we took advantage of this opportunity to update folks on the city's dialogue and collaboration with Mass DOT, which controls State Route 38, Mystic Avenue in your neighborhood. Folks, some of you may remember, but I-93 was grafted onto our urban fabric back in the late 60s. McGrath Highway was widened to what we think of as its current status back in about 1955. Much longer ago, these were human-scaled streets. Mystic Avenue, obviously, is essentially a regional highway that speeds through the neighborhood, and it was so sad for us that Kevin was killed in a hit-and-run crash. So we wanted to update you. Based on our advocacy, our partners at Mass DOT have taken a series of measures. They've put some new signage up, they've put some new crosswalk markings up, and they're working on a series of larger construction projects, engineering types, to provide pedestrian refuge islands, modern signal equipment to make sure that walking, whether you're connecting 10 Hills to the Healey School or the Winter Hill neighborhood to Blessings of the Bay and Assembly, is safer and more inviting no matter how you get around. We recognize that these roads like McGrath and Mystic Avenue are a barrier. They're psychological barriers, they're physical barriers. They cut our residents off from goods, services, jobs, and their social lives. So the city is working tirelessly. Jesse Klingon has been a great partner on these issues. Representative Christine Barber has been a great partner on these issues. So you can see the full presentation and video of the community meeting we had in East Somerville on the city's website. So we just wanted to make sure that folks understood that crews have been out there trying to mitigate and improve pedestrian safety at Shore Drive going into the wintertime. So let's talk about Broadway. Some of you have been attending community meetings at City Hall. Some of you were involved a couple of years ago when we were doing meetings in this room to talk about Broadway. So we wanted to make sure that we took the opportunity to listen because we genuinely care what our residents and stakeholders feel about these types of changes to the public streets in our city. But we also wanted to take a moment and kind of set a big picture framework for why the city makes decisions to prioritize different types of transportation. Right? 100 years ago, as folks have probably seen in historic postcards, there was streetcar service running down the middle of Broadway. You could hop on, you could hop off. That type of condition was present everywhere you see an MBTA bus in Somerville. There used to be a streetcar. It was affordable, it was equitable, it was sustainable. And then in the 1940s and 50s, these things were intentionally closed. Our society made a series of decisions to serve the suburbs at the expense of urban communities like Somerville. Many of these decisions were rooted in structural racism. Communities of color were selected for highways to be driven through them. Homes were taken, highways were built. And so Broadway obviously is now much more of a car street than a walking street or a transit street. And the city of Somerville went through a community planning process to organize our education, our environmental, our economic, our housing goals, our transportation goals. It's called Summer Vision, and our community spoke and said they wanted to bring us back to those roots. Getting the green line here is important. It's a big part of the solution set to give people more genuine choices to get around and not feel like you just have to use a car for every trip. However, the green line is not enough. We need buses that run on time. The city also made a visionary commitment to decarbonize all of our operations, including our transportation system. Something like 40%, 35% of the city's carbon footprint comes from the tailpipes of our motor vehicles. This is a long-term transition that our community has committed itself to, but it doesn't work unless we continue to invest in bus transit. Now, more recently, the MBTA has recognized that it could hire all the drivers in the world, it could buy all the buses in the world, but they're still going to be stuck in traffic, and people are not going to choose buses. Tons of research has been done about this. If buses are not on time, people don't choose them. They're going to get an Uber. They're going to save up and buy a car. They're going to use that car. And so the Commonwealth and the regional authority is calling on municipalities to actually prioritize bus movements. And we've seen a real renaissance in this. People have probably been following the news, that Cambridge, Watertown, Arlington, Everett, and the city of Boston have joined Somerville to prioritize bus movements and mobility. So Adam can talk a little bit about some of the community process and some of the technical analysis that went into these decisions, and then we'll provide plenty of space for you to ask questions and have a brief discussion here in a moment. But Adam, you went out and you counted people, you counted cars, you counted people on buses.
Yep. So there were a number of things that we did as we were really ramping up this project, and one of them was to get a better understanding of how people are actually moving along Broadway right now. We collect bicycle and pedestrian counts every year, so we have a good baseline data in terms of understanding how many people bike and walk on Broadway right now. We've also collected turning movement counts, which are a way to assess the number of vehicles moving through the certain intersections and up and down Broadway. And then we also have good ridership data from the MBTA to understand how many people are getting on and off and moving along Broadway on buses. And what's interesting about this graphic is that when you dig into the data a little bit, you find that even though there's almost 1,500 cars using Broadway on a typical weekday rush hour morning, and there are only 20 buses, and you assume that pretty much everyone's driving, when you look at how many people are actually on those buses and how many people Broadway's moving, it's actually something like 25% of those people are on buses, and a non-insignificant amount of people are also walking and taking bikes as well. So that was a pretty shocking number for us and something that we thought really hard about and made it a little bit easier for us as we started to decide what we were going to do in terms of our redesign.
So our community process encouraged us to make it safer, more convenient to walk, to ride a bicycle, to hop on a bus, to get in and around this neighborhood. How are we going to measure whether this project is successful? We know it's been a tough 6 weeks. We admit that very, very freely. The original sequence of the contractors that the city was lining up intended to have the electrical contractors come first and the pavement markings contractors come second. We had a historically rainy springtime that actually delayed the contractor who was doing the pavement markings. We typically want to do stuff like this in the summertime when traffic's a little bit lower. For that, we apologize. The fact that it was starting to go into place in September during a seasonal back-to-school spike created a very hard situation for you and your neighbors, and we are empathetic and admit that, and we'll work to do better on future projects. In terms of the electrical work, again, we can cajole and we can beg and we can plead with our contractors to prioritize work in the city of Somerville, and we were not able to get the electrician here prior to the pavement markings change, and as a result, those first 4-6 weeks, there was artificial congestion that we know was backing up past Central Street in the eastbound direction in the morning, and we know that that was creating incentives for people to pop down Thurston Street, to pop down Marshall, to do the bypassing into your neighborhoods. That is not our objective, and we're always trying to make sure we minimize cut-through traffic on neighborhood streets. So again, we apologize. The good news is that last week the electricians were on site. The traffic signals have been changed. The other thing that we wanted to point out is that Mass DOT has been having some real struggles with the traffic signals over at McGrath Highway, and there was extreme back-to-school congestion. We all know about the block the box behavior, where people are getting stuck in the middle of that big intersection. The Somerville Police Department and our partners at Mass State Police have been doing incredible work over the last 3 or 4 weeks to try to really organize and discourage that behavior. They've been writing citations for people getting stuck and blocking the box, which of course quickly spills back into your neighborhood. So we feel that over the last couple of weeks, there have been important steps in the process that we wish had been in place back in the summertime. They weren't. So how will we measure the success going forward? Well, to Adam's point, we always measure all modes of travel. So we've just finished our seasonal bike and pedestrian counts. Adam, you've been leading this process. You were out there doing observations pretty much around the clock over the last 6 weeks, right?
Yeah, and I personally went out and collected the Broadway at Temple Street location. We have about 40 locations across the city that we collect data at every year, as I had mentioned. One of them is at Broadway and Temple, so we have a good understanding of how that's changing from year to year, and I did collect both of those counts during the morning rush hour and during the evening rush hour at Broadway and Temple. While we're seeing a bit of a fluctuation in the number of pedestrians going, this is showing how many people are walking along Broadway in between Temple Street and School Street, which is one of the more active parts of Broadway and Winter Hill in general. That number is fluctuating a bit. It is trending in the upward direction. We're also seeing the same thing when you look at cyclists on the next slide.
And we get these questions all the time, folks. We're responsible for about 100 miles of city streets, and there's a chicken and egg dynamic that I would invite folks to ask about. But again, we've heard it in our public meetings. We've heard it in our neighborhood office hour sessions with Councilor Klingon. The idea of nobody's walking somewhere, so why would you prioritize pedestrian movements? Nobody's biking somewhere, why would you prioritize safe biking environments? For us, there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg logic, which says if you make a safe, predictable, and inviting environment, more people will choose to use those other modes. And again, nobody likes being stuck in traffic, and nobody likes having cars cut through their neighborhoods. We've done cell phone data research, and we know that 75 or 80% of the motor vehicles in our city have nothing to do with Somerville. One of the first terms that I learned from Mayor Joe long ago when I moved here in 2007 was that Somerville had served as this on and off ramp for the greater Boston economy, and our residents were sick and tired of it. We now have actual data to show that of the motor vehicles on any one of our streets, that again, most of them are not our residents, they're not our workers, and they're not patronizing our businesses, they're just cutting through. Those are not our primary stakeholders. You are, our residents are, our business owners are, and our workers are. So we're always looking to try to manage that and provide more useful, safe trips for people to get around, no matter what your age, your ability, or your preference is. So in terms of bus mobility, we got some early returns on the data, and again, you all have been asking us to prioritize management data? Are we observing the trends that we want to see? This is early days. We've only had a couple of weeks of the data, but the stuff is almost live time that the TEAC now collects through GPS units on their buses and automated passenger counters. Adam, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. So what you're seeing here is the average travel time across the entire day for an MBTA bus on Broadway, where it stops at the Thurston Street stop all the way down to McGrath Highway. And in August through October of 2018, which is the red line there, it was about 3 minutes on average. In October, was trending a little bit up towards 3.5. And when we compare that to 2019, what we're starting to see is that it's actually trending in the other direction. So what was 3 minutes on average, again, across the entire day, is closer to 2.5 now. We haven't broken this down into hour by hour, but what we're expecting to see is that a lot of those returns and a lot of the decrease is actually during the peak hour, because that's when the most congestion is, and that's when the buses really benefit from the street design.
So again, our commitment to you is that we will be collecting and managing data about people driving, about people riding buses, about people walking, and people bicycling. There are several other key data. Jason, I'll come to you in a second, okay? So crashes are clearly one of the most important data points for us as we try to keep our residents safe. And we know that there were a couple of high-profile crashes here in the neighborhood as people were taking advantage of the bus lane and driving too fast on it. So we get data from the police department every week or so, and we'll be processing that data as well. And the last thing we wanted to flag before I come to you, Jason, and we invite some of these conversations, folks who have been working with us and paying attention to this project know that we had called for a new crosswalk to be installed at Thurston and Fenwick to actually, again, provide a useful connection to the inbound bus stop at Thurston, which is statistically one of the busiest, most important bus stops in the whole project corridor. And so we had to essentially delay some of that work for a couple of different reasons, but we are working on it right now. The city's consultants just gave us a new drawing today, and they're working on how we can get in there and install a safe, useful crosswalk. It's about 90 feet long, 80 feet long, and we want to just make sure that again, people are safe when they actually use that crosswalk. We'll bring those ramps into compliance and work around some of the utilities, the catch basins and the manholes that are there. But again, the idea is to provide more connections to more parts of the neighborhood, and I wish that we had been able to deliver this earlier, but we are still working on it and are committed to making it happen. Okay. So, sorry, let me just kind of curate things, and Jason's been waiting, then I'll come to you in the front, okay? Sorry, Jason. I'll come to you third, sir. No, thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. And again, appreciate all the time that you've been putting in, coming to City Hall, coming to meetings, seeing you out on the street. Love to actually dig into the data with you. That would be most welcome. Okay. I appreciate that. So, I'll come to you third, please. So we are doing everything in our power to make it happen over the next 6 weeks, but we are trying to set fair expectations that there is a good chance, I would say greater than 50% chance, that some of the work is going to bleed into next spring. Again, we're just running out of construction season here, so we're doing everything humanly possible. The mayor has asked us to deprioritize other important work so we can prioritize this. So again, we've dropped everything, and we've gotten our consultants moving. The city staff from several different departments are working on this to do everything in our power to deliver this season. Okay. Sir, I apologize for keeping you waiting. Yes?
I'd like to know if anybody stick there, how many people tried to take the right turn from Black Highway onto Broadway? You got one lane and nobody unless you
So the question was the southbound right-hand turn from McGrath 28 onto westbound Broadway? Going towards Winter Hill, going up the hill? No, I appreciate that point. And so it wasn't just McGrath High you were asking about, it's also the side streets, as you said. Yep. Right, right. Yeah. Understood. Well, actually, Jesse, please go ahead. Yes.
I'll pass mine around.
Sure thing, thanks. So I'll come to you next, ma'am. Just on that point about the turns, we recognize that motorist education, that additional signage really could be helpful. You know, this is a standard type of bus lane that is used all around the country and increasingly all around the region. City of Boston's installing a couple right now. City of Cambridge has one. And so, again, if there's additional signage that's needed or additional pavement markings for do not block the box, those are things that we can work on. Right, right. Yep. Yeah, so the question again was about motorists on the main line of Broadway not letting folks come in from Dartmouth, from Sycamore, from Central. Right, okay. Yes, understood, and these are issues that we are working on. I apologize. Go ahead.
Excuse me. I worked as an analyst too, so may I just point it out the way you were saying that one day you take the data, a statistic that you see like 20 buses versus 1,500 cars, and then you were shocked that this many people in 1,500 cars could take the bus, but you don't take the survey on where these 1,500 people go to work. They might not need the bus like me. I would never take the bus because I worked in Lowell. It took me an hour, and now I have to add 10 more minutes to go there. So that data, the data statistic there is totally misleading. I'm sorry. So, and another...
Can I just address that before you make your next point, please? No, thank you. Again, this is a little bit of a snapshot of the way that we analyze data. There are more data analyses coming. We will make them available to all of you. As Jesse and Stephanie said, we will be working on specific community meetings. This meeting is intended to cover a lot of ground, and we know that this is a hot topic, but we also want to set up a bigger, more specialized meeting. And so again, Jesse and Stephanie and their colleagues have been great partners on that. So we will be working to get more of the data ready and make sure that it's meaningful for everybody, no matter where you're going or where you're coming from.
Number two, you were saying that you're trying to make people, discourage people who use Somerville for their own crossroad to Boston, whatsoever. You were also successful to stop me from going down Cedar Street. I avoided Cedar Street for many, many months now because of all the curb outside the street like this. So when a car coming the opposite side, I would try to stay on the curb, move closer to the curve, so I can feel safe because the other cars, bigger car coming across this, but now there's a curve. Sometimes I have to be more careful for myself to hit that curve. And I avoided Cedar Street for a long time now. I used to love that Cedar Street. And now this thing coming to Broadway. And every day I would sit in traffic looking at the red line for the bus line empty, and I was sitting here late for another, I need another 10 minutes to get to work. And at one of the meetings, you were saying that this is the MBTA preference. They want 24/7 bus line. And why do we have to yield to MBTA? Do you receive anything from them, grants or whatsoever, favors? I think it's, every day I look at that red line, there's two things that come to my mind. One, my frustration. Now during my frustration, I imagine you and Mayor Joe did this thing to me, okay, personally, and I don't know how do you feel standing there listening to people giving their grievance and frustration, right? So, and then secondly, that red road, red. I came from a communist country. I avoid red. I hated red. It represents blood. It's blood. It hits your face like this. It's not good. It's a very, very negative thought, feelings coming up. And I don't know how would you feel standing there listening to people who vent their frustration. Do you feel it's such a great accomplishment to the state doing this 3 blocks to Broadway? You know, and I don't understand you guys anymore. I cannot complain anymore. I just don't understand how 2 persons can come up and implement this thing on 3 blocks on the Broadway. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, all good points. I appreciate you making them. But folks, we do community meetings almost every night of the week, almost every month of the year. We are constantly hearing from residents who have different visions about how to design a park, about how to design or manage a street, and it is our quest and our goal to make sure all voices are heard at the right stages of the process so that we can come up with the best compromised solution. The community process that we went through on this project asked us to do this. And so this is what we have done, and we've committed to you that this is a work in progress and a low-cost measure, and if there are elements that are not working properly, we have committed to you that we will make changes as we go forward. Please. Again, so the question was, are you getting positive comments? And it's a city of 80,000 people. We get a lot of comments on every issue that we work on, and we have had many people say, my trip is better, I appreciate what you're doing, and we've had many people say that this is the silliest thing that they've ever seen. So again, we recognize that everybody who just clapped their hands a minute ago, that your opinions are valid, and we are here to listen. Thank goodness we still have a system in this community and in this country where we can respectfully disagree on these issues. We can't take these things for granted, and the reason that we're here in front of you all is because we genuinely care and we are genuinely listening. Okay, let me take 1 or 2 more, please, and then we're going to have to go on to other speakers. Yes, please.
I live locally and I work locally, and I am a big fan of this change. And so I want to say that, yes, there are people who really appreciate the changes that are happening, that are going to bring more transit options to those, you know, who would be able to get to the, use the bus lanes to get to where they're going. And obviously it's going to be a challenge to balance everything. But yes, there are positive voices, positive feedback.
Well, thank you. And folks, let me say, we read your emails. We read every one of the emails that come in. We read the news articles, we read the social media feeds. We know that this is a hard and divisive issue, and we are working to try to manage it in a way that makes sense for as many people as possible. But I do want to point out that I've been a public servant in this community and a resident for 12 years, and people have told me time and again that the status quo was not working for them, and that they expected their local government to be working to challenge elements of the status quo that weren't working for them. And so these are efforts by the city to make it more reliable to get around, no matter how you get around, to make it cheaper and more affordable to get around. The average Somerville household that buys a car because the bus is only coming on time 50% of the time takes $10,000 out of their household budget to save up and buy that car. There's been all sorts of research about this. And look, I'm a new dad. My kid turns 4 years old on Monday. I used to be a bicycle commuter for like 350 days a year. Now it's about 50% of the time. I drive a ton. We recognize and respect the fact that people have different mobility needs, whether it's their commute to the suburbs that are not served by transit, or whether it's their physical or their schedule, their family or social needs. And we are working to balance and rationalize and reconcile all of these competing points. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up right there, folks. I know you want to keep talking about this. Adam and I will be glad to talk to you next door, but folks have come to for other reasons.
You want to avoid me? You're a jerk. I said you had hand up the whole meeting. You called everybody else because you know what I have to say and you know what's right.
So, Taylor, we have It's 7:15. Do you want to, or 10 past? Do you want to give us another 5 minutes? I'd be happy to take another 5 minutes, folks. But again, we're trying to be respectful. Okay? We'll go across the room one more time, please.
So when we're at Fenwick Street, heading towards Ball Square, okay, is the crosswalk going to be as we're trying to make the right turn into Fenwick or after Fenwick? It makes sense to make it after the Fenwick because you don't want to hit pedestrians when you're trying to make the right turn into Fenwick.
Yes,
Okay,
good question. That's part of the reason that we work with the engineers. The consensus that's coming out right now is that it's on the western side, the uphill side. So you would turn right onto Fenwick, going up the hill first, and then the crosswalk would be sited after. But we've investigated both options. Okay, so I hear you. Arthur, please go ahead.
What are you gonna do about getting the red lines off before these businesses die off? You took away all the parking from these new places.
You want to-
They are dead. I went over to Mama Lisa's and all those stores, every single one. I walked in, talked to them, they're all dying because of this.
So the question was about business vitality, about revenues, about convenient parking, informing customer visits, right?
They don't have any parking over the new building. They got a tiny spot out back. Nobody can get in there. They're all leaving. The old people can't come up to the door because you got those stupid folks there.
So you talked about Mama Lisa's going on the inbound direction, and then one of the questions about the parking was in the uphill direction with the new building at 315 Broadway at the corner of Temple and Broadway.
Women just moved from Union Square because you lost their parking. Put your money into the second place and you took the parking again. It's like you guys have a been better against it.
Folks. Yep. I think we're okay, folks. So, Arthur, I think I've captured your point that on the up. Let's have one conversation, folks. Seriously, we will listen and we will pop out into the other rooms if people want to keep talking as others move on to the other agenda items tonight. So in terms of the business vitality, we did outreach. We were in the stores with each one of the merchants. We were asking about loading. We were asking about worker parking. We were asking about deliveries and their individual schedules to get ready for this process. That was part of our outreach and part of our engagement, right, Adam?
Yeah. So we did some customer intercept surveys, particularly on the 315 Broadway block. We found that of all the people frequenting those businesses, a lot of them were actually Winter Hill residents, and 75% of those people got there not by car and not by driving, but by walking, taking the bus, or biking. A lot by walking, actually.
So, and folks, yeah, honestly, I think applauding people who make your point for you in some ways just kind of increases the temperature here. We are genuinely trying to facilitate a process where we can all respectfully raise our voices. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving across the room one more time, and then we are going to move on front to back. Okay, yes, please.
I have only like 5 customers a day. But before I got like about 30, now it's 5. Sometimes like one day I don't have any customer at all, just because the traffic is horrible. The bus lane and the bike lane, it took our parking lot in front of ways. No one can park and they drive away. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's make sure we follow up afterwards with you, okay? Thank you. So we've got some economic development staffs here, so we'll be happy to talk with you in more detail. Okay, thank you. One more time, yes, please. Edgar.
Your data shows a savings of 45 seconds to 1 minute on the bus route. Does that justify putting the red bus lanes in there? Were these particular routes always late? And does 45 seconds make any difference? And we all pay for the inconvenience?
So the question, I think folks heard the question, Edgar had the microphone. So what we are saying is that there are several ways to look at the data to know if these trade-offs are appropriate and acceptable. That is one. We will be collecting those data as well as the traffic queuing data, as well as merchant revenues and visits to local shops as well. So again, we will be reporting back to you all on the details. One or two more, please. Yes, Jake, and then I'll come to you, ma'am. You've been waiting.
Hi, so my name is Jacob, and I live over in Ward 7, but I want to be at this meeting because I'm an experienced and avid bike rider. I bike everywhere, all year round, every year. I don't have a car, never have, and probably never will. What do you plan to do about wintertime? You have these nice safety poles up. How are you going to plow and give me my bike lane back? Am I going to not have a place to bike this winter?
It's a good question. The city's DPW group has invested in new equipment as Beacon Street has been constructed, as Webster Avenue has been constructed, as Washington Street by the old Boys and Girls Club and Coda Funeral Home has been constructed, because in the same way that dedicated bus lanes have become a standard for American cities, these protected bike lanes have as well. So we've been working on standard operating procedures for snow clearing. And as Chief Breen can talk about, our first priority is always making sure our first responders can get around. And then bus routes to school, and all those sorts of kind of main cross-town routes for drivers, for bus riders, for bikers kind of come into play. So the DPW teams have purchased new equipment. We've got workers who are dedicated to clearing those spaces, and we expect to keep them open year-round. Yes, ma'am.
You take that into effect of what with asthma, children's and adults, and people waiting at the bus, waiting for a bus, and all these cars are idling.
Thanks, Sharon. So the question, if anyone didn't hear, was particulate matter, tailpipe emissions from increased congestion. The answer is yes, we have collected baseline data. It's been more focused on Mystic Avenue, McGrath Highway, and kind of the far eastern side of Broadway, so kind of like Grant Street down to McGrath. But we do have baseline data, and we will be collecting additional data to actually compare that. One of the things that we've learned from Tufts University, which is actually one of the planet's premier research institutions on the health impacts of tailpipe emissions, is that a lot of it is actually about the volume of motor vehicles, not so much whether you've got one line of them that's backed up in traffic. So they've been driving around a mobile unit as our consultant that actually gets 3 readings per second for all the different types of nasty pollutants out there. And Greater Boston is really struggling with congestion, and there are too many communities from Dorchester to Chelsea to East Somerville and Winter Hill that are dealing with the legacy of increased asthma rates, increased cardiovascular disease rates. We've documented this stuff over and over again, and that is part of the reason that we are working to try to give people a more genuine ability for short trips to actually get around without driving. It's part of the reason that we're actually investing in electric vehicle charging stations that are available to the public to help facilitate that transition to a non-petroleum, delivery fleet and private car fleet. So I hear your question, Sharon, and we have some data, and that'll be part of our process going forward as well. So I've gone another 5 minutes past. Do you want me to kind of catch 1 or 2 points over here, and then we'll move on? So I'm going to go right to left, okay? Steph, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to first and foremost, Steph Amon from the Mystics, wanted to thank you so much for your attention as soon as those fatalities that happened on Mystic Ave. Really appreciate the extra signing, the lightage, the camera work. I know that you guys have to deal with a lot of cars in Somerville, so we appreciate that you took the time to look on our little community. Also, too, we was trying to figure out a way to shorten up some of the, the traffic on Temple, and was hoping that if a city wanted to get Temple Road closed off for a little bit during high peak hours, the problem is a lot of cars coming out of my community are unfortunately unable to take that right turn to go up Temple Ave, and Temple Street to get to Broadway Ave, and so hopefully if we can make Temple Road, I do not enter during the peak hours, maybe in the morning or in the evenings as well, and have that traffic just take that Mystic Ave down and take that left on Harvard, and then take that rotary down a little bit further down. Hopefully the amount of cars on Broadway because a lot of cars that drive through Somerville just use it to get to Cambridge, and so, all right, thank you.
No, thanks. Good points. Yeah, so the question was about Temple Street. We do have data, Steph, on Temple Street. We actually just collected some a couple of weeks ago to see if we've actually reduced the motor vehicle speeds by installing those bike lanes. The bike lanes provide a safer place for people to be, but we've done a bunch of research that shows that it actually creates a little bit of an optical illusion, and the drivers that want to speed through our neighborhoods drive a little bit slower. So something like 40% of the motor vehicles on Temple Street in your neighborhood were illegally speeding when we got our baseline data a year ago, and now a month ago when we collected the data, it's more like like 25%. So the trends are moving in the right direction in terms of collisions and the risk for health in that front. But again, there's still too much volume, and that's part of our objective here, is to make sure that we serve people who live here, but that for those convenient cut-through routes, that people stay on the freeway or stay on Route 16 to get to Cambridge.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for all the work you've been doing on this. I really appreciate it. About 5 years ago, I got hit just about where that picture was taken by a car. I was driving up Broadway in the center lane, going straight, doing everything I'm supposed to, got my little lights on, it's daytime, and this guy just hit me from behind. And what he said was, "Oh, I didn't see you there," right in front of you going straight up a straight lane, but whatever. So I'm very thankful for the bike lanes because now I feel a lot safer. I feel Winter Hill has a unique issue where we are closed off from the rest of Somerville unless you're in a car, because you have Mystic Ave, 93, you've got McGrath, you've got a big hill, and you've got a big hill. So if you're on a bike or if you're walking, you're kind of segregated. So you need every little step you can have. So if people, maybe I'm being selfish, but people have to wait 10 more minutes to get to work and I don't have to die, I'm okay with that.
So you've been waiting, sir, and you'll be the last comment, okay? And seriously, we will go outside and we will talk with folks as long as you want to. I will be here till 9 o'clock or 9:30, be happy to engage with you. And again, this process is not finished, folks. If the city meant for these to be the final elements, we would have been building granite curbs and pouring concrete sidewalks. These are pavement markings and traffic signal timing changes. So we will be working to manage them. And if there are things that are not going well enough for us, we'll modify them. Please go ahead.
Regarding Broadway, I live on Grand Street off of Broadway.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
I live on Grand Street off of Broadway.
Grand Street.
And I'm up Broadway all the time, so I hit all the pizza places. So during rush hour, most of the cars are on the left side, and it backs up all the way down to the lights, Dunkin' Donuts. And I see a lot of people getting out of the traffic and rushing into the bus lane. And somebody's going to get hit one of these days. I mean, people don't want to wait. They just rush.
Yes.
And then they go back into the road.
Yes, we agree.
I see that a lot.
We agree. Absolutely. And our police department has been working to educate and to enforce, to try to have again, an education framework, but an
People get
enforcement framework.
impatient. They don't like to wait in traffic.
And I'm genuinely hoping,
They're going to cut over.
I'm genuinely hoping that with these traffic signal timing changes, there are fewer incentives for people to break the law and use the bus lane and to go at high
For
speed.
myself, I have to go on Grand Street. I have to wait on the other side to cross over because I live it's on the right side.
Right.
So by the time, if I'm at the Dunkin' Donuts and I get to my house and I can't go to the right, I have to wait till I'm up the end of the street. It takes a half an hour.
Yes, I hear you.
And it's dangerous, too.
Yep. And has it been better the last week since the electrical work was done? That's one of the key questions that we'll be evaluating, right? Are those extreme queues a little bit better? So again, folks, we've been out there every rush hour, observing conditions, and we'll be collecting data and reporting back to you all as well, okay?
I mean, the police cannot be out there every minute giving out tickets, people that go to the other side.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it, and we'll stick around and have conversations with you all.
So the basketball court is reserved. If you would like to ask questions, we do have that space available.
So what Taylor just said, Brad Ross and his team, if you were to continue more intense conversations, it will be right available there on the other side of the wall, since there's for the first time, I think, in 10 years, during one of these meetings, an actual basketball game going on, which is helpful. So Brad and, I'm sorry, you all going over there? Okay, and Adam and company, thanks. I appreciate that. But I hope you stay. I'll give everybody a chance to move along so it's not too noisy. And there's other seats up here, folks. The seats, I know they're not the most comfortable chairs, but if you don't want to stand. guess Brad's the big ticket draw. Again, there's some more chairs up here, and so I'm gonna carrying on, and some of these topics will carry on to the conversation I'm gonna have with you, and some data I'm gonna provide you. First, I want to express, our appreciation for your patience and flexibility. We are doing a generation's worth of infrastructure work. Up in March, in East Somerville, the Washington underpass in April, as well as Medford Street open up. High school will be done less than a year from now. It's on schedule. So that'll give us alleviate a lot of the pressures. And so we appreciate your flexibility and your patience. But we talk a lot about in the community about the importance of our local economy. I'm glad to have that conversation tonight. And I want to make sure, Tom, you touch base with that gentleman with the small business number. Oh, you have, good. Whether it's for job creation or quality of life. But what we really discuss is what we're doing in detail to ensure that the economy is thriving. So tonight what I want to do is speak to you about the many ways the city is working to help really at the crux of our local economy, our alternative economies, those small businesses. We care about how we adapt and help them adapt and thrive amid a myriad of changes that occur in Somerville and around the region. We're pretty fortunate. We're very proud to have such a really resilient and diverse economic base. We don't just have typical businesses and chains. We have, as is outlined here, independent, small and micro businesses, as well as our maker and artist community, our self-employed residents and entrepreneurs and our startups, and as well as the national business partners that are coming to our transformational areas. Sorry, folks, I don't think I made that. I apologize. Okay. So our economic diversity, I think we can agree, just doesn't fuel the city. It really defines us. And Somerville is really known for its unique and small businesses, our artists, our makers, and more. At the same time, they help promote and move many of our shared community goals. Through them, we do achieve goals like walkability and sustainability, diversity, community, and job creation. Big companies, they get the headlines. You hear about the big international companies that are trying to make Somerville their home, but it's the bulk of the local communities made up of these groups here that are outlined in the slide, our small, creative, independent businesses, again, our entrepreneurs, the self-starters. So I'm going to speak specifically and give some data about what we're doing to ensure, again, that they're not only successful when they launch, but they stay resilient and they're strong. And there's a question we should all ask ourselves and internalize as we think about this information and data is, how does this impact us individually and as a community? Our local economy aids us in many goals. One of them is our sustainability goals. As Brad mentioned, it is true. We know there's some Somerville Climate Forward. More than a third of Somerville's greenhouse gas emissions comes from transportation, with nearly 60% of that coming from passenger vehicles, mostly single occupancy passenger vehicles. And I think he said this figure, about 82% of the cars that you see in Somerville today, those trips don't start or end here. They're just passing through, going somewhere else. Since mid-century, when Somerville had almost 20 rail and trolley stops, and then the highway became king, not just with I-93 cutting off North and South Somerville and 10 Hills and the nunnery grounds, but the expansion of Route 28 McGrath Highway, it changed. We became a city. We planned a community for cars, and that's exactly what we got. And we're trying to plan a city for people, not just cars. The cars has a future. The question is, what kind of car might be different, how its engine operates, and so forth. But if we don't embrace the human scale, we're going to see continued consequences on our sustainability and many other issues. So if we want to reduce carbon emissions from transportation, then we do need to shift trips away from cars. And one of our goals, Brad mentioned summer vision, is to shift all new vehicle trips by a minimum of 50% to more biking, walking, and reliable public transportation. And one way to do that from an economic perspective is to help that we have nearby shops and amenities that make it easy not to drive, so you don't have to get in your car and go somewhere else. You can walk or take the Green Line or some other low-carbon, equitable mode of transport. So we can also, again, reduce the city's footprint if we support models that require less commuting, such as entrepreneurs who work out of their homes or at local co-working spaces. Affordability, is also a top priority for our community on both sides, the residential and commercial side. One driver of affordability, as we know, is taxes. I'll take the perspective on what we're doing on the residential side. How do we alleviate the burden of the residential taxpayer? If we want to keep those rates low on the residential side, you've heard me say over and over again that it's our long-term community goal is to shift that burden more to the commercial side. And we do that by increasing commercial taxes, and a way to do that is to grow more businesses, commercial businesses, large and small, who pay those taxes. So also, from a small business side, we have an opportunity to diversify our revenue stream. In Massachusetts, cities and towns have very little or any revenue-raising authority. You get your money from the state, local aid, you get it from property tax, commercial, residential, and other fees and fines or investments that come back to the city. It's a very rigid formula, so the more you can, within those rules, diversify your revenue stream, the better. We're excited that commercial meals and other forms of local option taxes adopted have increased and providing that diverse revenue stream. So we can do that by helping small businesses thrive and welcoming new ones and expanding that commercial base. So also successful restaurants, shops, and services ultimately can help lower the cost of living here as well. And again, we're fortunate enough to have a lot of that in Somerville. Another lens to think about this is how our local economy enhances our quality of life. I hear so often, we all do, that the one thing many of us love about living here is the walkability and vibrancy of our squares and our business districts, which we want Winter Hill to be. We want it to be a place like Davis is, like Union is and continue to evolve, like Gilman Square is going to be, like Assembly is a place that is vibrant, that is active, full of sidewalk life and activity. Our happiness shows this. Happiness survey that we conduct biannually shows this as well. So that if we want residents to be happy living in Somerville, we need to, again, have great neighborhoods and squares where residents can run their errands, they can shop, they can eat, they can go out, or just feel connected to the community. And that's why we also work hard to draw customers into our squares and business districts. And I'm going to discuss a little bit how we're doing that in upcoming slides. But first, I do want to mention there are pressures, as we can imagine, on our local economy from many directions, which means we have to remain vigilant in helping those local businesses. So globally, we are facing climate change, and we're also a growing population. Part of the affordability crisis across the greater Boston region is communities like Somerville that are vibrant, that are welcoming. People want to live there. And it's also, you see it in what is now the greatest demographic shift in this nation's history since mid-century. People no longer want to live in the sort of fringe suburb. They want to live in the urban core, where you're connected to the people around you, where you can take public transportation, be connected to its vibrant city life and urban life. Right now, 54% of the world's population lives in city regions like the Metro Boston region. That figure will go up to 75% by 2050. So we need to think, as a city in the region, what kind of community we're going to be? How are we going to take on the legacy challenges around mobility, on affordability, on climate action, and so forth. So globally, we're facing, and businesses we're all facing this year locally, climate change, a growing population, businesses that are having to deal with the culture of convenience, including the shift to an online economy. Think about how retail, we hear this thing's been turned upside down. How do we access our goods and services now? Is it the same way you did even 3 years ago, 5 years ago? I know for me it's different. For a lot of people it is. Locally in Somerville, we have changes coming from, again, infrastructure, new infrastructure, new development that we need to manage and mitigate, and we are part of a national population shift, again, to the urban core that is also putting pressure on affordability on many different fronts. On top of that, our businesses, and like many others, face specific challenges. They face still competition from those big box stores and chains. They face staffing challenges and barriers to startup capital. They might need information and training, or they have to navigate red tape with many different, varying different regulatory agencies. Some face equity issues that create barriers to entry for minority and other business owners. And as I mentioned, construction and real estate, including rents, can present other challenges. And this is important to keep in mind because I have a lot of admiration that people want to start their own business, especially small business owners. This slide from the Small Business Association and Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows that within the first 5 years, half of those small businesses nationally fail, and 2/3 typically fail within 10. And we need to understand why. What are those barriers for success? It's one thing to open and cut the ribbon on your business. Can you sustain in the long term? For us, the old model of economic development wasn't addressing all the current challenges that small, micro, and alternative and startup businesses face. So what we as a city began doing is thinking creatively about how to address what we refer to as modern economic development needs. And so we're working in many ways to counter these challenges, and I'm going to try to give you a window into 3 broad examples of what our alternative economic development looks like in action, starting with a closer look at some of the ways that we actually try to connect customers to small and local businesses while also supporting our creative economy. So one way is through the arts, and it should be of no surprise, Somerville is known and loved for its strength in the arts. People come regionally, even across the country and other parts of the world to participate in our local events and cultural celebrations. So, but when the Arts Council does host some fun festival like Art Beat or Ignite or Honk, it's not just a great way to spend a Saturday, which it can be. It's also an immensely effective way to support our squares and local businesses. And so we hired an independent research firm and found that for every $1 on festivals that we spend on festivals or murals and or cultural events, we see a very large economic return, $4.40 for every $1. That's actually an economic impacts. So how does it work? Well, first, there are direct benefits that we give to the artists and makers that we hire in the businesses that the Arts Council pays for supplies like tents or posters. Then some of those dollars get, as you can imagine, spent again locally, recycled back into the local economy by those artists and those businesses. And at the same time, as if you've been to any of these events, I'm sure many of you have, they draw some pretty big crowds, which is great. I think Fluff had all over 20,000 people, and Honk was jammed, and many of the other ones. And they come to the squares and the business districts, they frequent the shops, they buy food and they buy art, so that again brings in more, cycles more economic activity, and finally visitors at our events notice other restaurants and services and even nonprofits to return to later on another day. And we've always heard in the past from some of our successful business owners or restaurants, what they want most is another successful business next to them and next to them and so forth, to have this concentration of really positive and successful activity. So this kind of placement builds really a concentrated customer base over time. And when we take a closer look at how events pump money into our local economy, it's interesting. When that same research firm looked just at the economic impact of our arts union programming that happens in Union Square, and they did this about a decade ago. That art series alone was found to be injecting roughly $200,000 to $350,000 into Union Square annually. And then when we look back at event spending by the Arts Council over the last 5 fiscal years, then we multiplied this conservatively by 4, not the 4.4 you saw on the other slide. The researchers identified interesting stats here, then shows that our citywide cultural and arts events have injected more than $3 million over 5 years right here into our local economy. And that, again, is money for the artists, it's money for performers, restaurants, for small businesses, and a lot more. But I do want to come back to this idea of placemaking as we think about our neighborhoods and squares and ask ourselves, where's the place? People want to go to, frequent, and stick around in places. It's natural that they feel comfortable, right? And what we strive to do is make them comfortable with activities, with outdoor furniture, or just appealing open spaces. And as I just discussed and went over, many different types of events that brings people there. So when we do placemaking, we actually see results. So here's an example. Kenny Park, if you don't know, is when you're going down Highland Avenue to Davis Square, it's the park on your left, right before Davis Square. At Kenny Park, after we did the park over, we fixed the water feature, added movable chairs that anybody can access. What we saw was 40% more people sitting in the park, and so we saw more parents watching kids in the splash park by day, or more couples and others on dinner dates, or just frequent the park at night. So that in turn creates a sense of place, helps that, and the business helps support the businesses and other activities in the square. And not to mention how it helps to expand the sort of social equity of the city. We become more connected to one another. We're not just images of blurred faces passing by in some automobile on one of our streets. But like cultural events, studies have found that when communities, and this is hard data by Brookings, by many other places, that we improve other forms of mobility, in this case pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, those cities gain net new businesses, they gain private investment, and customers actually spend more locally in the community. That's because when you drive, again, 83% of the cars you see in Somerville, they're not stopping at any one of these stores. They're not going anywhere. They're going somewhere else because we decided to become an on and off ramp to Boston. And when we decided long ago we're going to stop that. And that's because, again, when you drive, people just pass by, but pedestrians and cyclists, they actually do stop. They do notice the businesses, and they actually do become customers. So even dedicated bus lanes like the one we just talked about, that actually increases ridership. That's important because people will walk to and from the bus stops because it's a reliable form of transportation. It'll bring more people to that corridor and notice the shops and frequent them more. But here's some data to support that more, especially on the biking and walking. This came out of, back in 2013, out of from Portland State University, an example from Portland, Oregon. It shows that cyclists and pedestrians there actually spent more per month locally and in those areas because they stopped more often at those local businesses. The other part I mentioned in terms of the challenges the businesses have, and Somerville's not immune to this, as really what are the equity and barriers, equity issues and barriers to entry. Opening a business, you gotta respect and have a lot of admiration if anyone wants to do this. It's hard work, and there are some barriers to entry that do keep people locked out. I already mentioned some like not having access to capital or funds to cover overhead or startup cost or having to figure out all of that red tape. But there are also language barriers, and it might be hard finding the right space and being able to afford it. You may not have all the necessary, you might have a great idea and it should be successful. Maybe you don't have all the necessary skills and training to handle all parts of the business that it requires. And so you might need access to on-the-job or education training. And we see how this is playing out with some groups from census data right here in Somerville. The majority of businesses here are male-owned in Somerville, and minorities only own about 18% of the business in Somerville. The question is why? What are the variables driving this? Why is this outcome, and what's it mean? Is it important to us? Yeah, it is important to us that we understand why in Somerville. I know some of these barriers are long-standing for the region, and we're not immune with other regions, and systemic. So a study of wealth in Boston, as you can see in the slide, found that white households in the area had a median net worth of nearly $250,000, while African-American households had a median net worth of $8. Again, is this important to us? What kind of impact can it have, especially for our community that's diverse, and we want to cultivate a strong, resilient, diverse economic base. For one, just consider and think about how people typically fund a small business startup. Many actually use credit cards, or they might use home equity. And you can sort of imagine how this would be a challenge for minority entrepreneurs. And that's one reason we have made, as a city organization, as a community, equity a key qualifier for one of our new businesses that operate in the city, our recreational marijuana licensing. We looked at who had been the most impacted by the war on drugs, and how can we, as an equity lens, bring people up to a fair level of play and competition and opportunity here in Somerville. So I want to credit the City Council on working on that with us in the community. Another is what we're doing with the Arts Council and our Nibble program. Nibble, again, is another example, an attempt at lowering the barriers specifically for immigrant entrepreneurs. Immigrants, twice as likely to start a business as U.S.-born residents, but can run into roadblocks around things, as you can imagine, language barriers, startup costs, again, everyone cuts across the board, navigating the permit and certification process. The Arts Council Nibble program helps immigrant entrepreneurs deal with red tape. It offers support in other languages and helps them organize low overhead events like pop-ups and vendings at festivals. And you probably, if you've been to any one of those festivals, you've had to have seen one, if not both, of these businesses that have grown out of this program. So these two permanent businesses have grown out of it. One is Las Carolinas and the Nibble Kitchen down at Bow Market. So far, chefs and cooks from 13 different countries have benefited from this program. So our Economic Development Division, Tom Galligani, he might be in the other room, but Sue Thomas is here. Sorry, Sue. Offers similar supports for businesses in other industries at their one-stop shop events where business owners can get help with permits and licenses and get help in other languages. Again, overcome those barriers to entry. We also looked at lowering barriers to entry, how it looks for other types of industries, and how we can look at our own rules and regulations or how state rules and regulations impact our small businesses. Two examples. One is how liquor licenses in Somerville really pushed this model, an example for the region. The way liquor licenses used to work here in the city was as follows. First of all, the whole state is under a per capita formula in the Mass General laws. You can only have so many liquor licenses based, it goes way back, and you can spend the whole week talking about this, by the amount of people living in your community. It gives no deference to your economic plans or where you sit in the economic spectrum. So we won't go there. So with the way it worked, though, if you own restaurants in Somerville or an establishment that had a liquor license and you were going to sell your business, when you have the liquor license, you actually don't own it. You own the privilege of possessing it, but you actually could sell it at fair market value to someone else who might buy your business, and the license commission would consider approving it. They would then own possession, but not own the license. And it created this false marketplace, and you can see how this is playing out right now in Boston. We broke away from them and explained in Boston, if you want to get a liquor license, you're going to spend upwards of $500,000 to own possession and the right to possess that license. So in Somerville, we saw this as a barrier to entry more than a decade ago. Over three different times, we've increased our allotment of licenses, but made it that when you are done with your business, the license comes back to the city. You now pay a nominal fee, but it was trending upwards of $200,000 at the time. So imagine being a small business owner, someone chasing a dream, instead of being able to put that money into finding a location and your business design and concept, you have to shell out hundreds of thousands of dollars for a liquor license. Now, it's a nominal fee, and when you're done, the license comes back to the city. And when we first launched this, we gave this priorities to areas on the eastern side of the city that weren't as, back then, as considered hip as Davis, so Union and East Broadway and Beacon up at Winter Hill, and now we've got more allotment. That's created great equity and opportunity, and other cities have pointed to Somerville, but that's how we have to get it done. State still has to just do some things to change it, to make it fair for everyone, but Somerville, one of the reasons you have constantly on the best rated list of restaurants is because Somerville has probably the highest concentration of locally or independently owned and managed restaurants in the greater Boston region. We looked similarly at food trucks because giving them more flexibility and lowering their upfront cost and sort of avoiding the challenge of real estate. A lot of the restaurants come out of the dining in concept. I don't know if you remember Peter Unger's a Ward 4 resident down at Foss Park, right? And his tasting counter, which is down at Aeronaut, that's the name of his restaurant, started out of his kitchen, dining in. The dining in is when you get an invite to someone's home, 8 to 10 people, set menu, people, and Casa B started that way, and other restaurants. Or some have come out of the food truck industry, and it's a great way for them to hone their idea and their concept. So I'm going to move it along. The third area is how we're striving to keep up with how people are working. That's changing also in the city and nationally. And we'll click it next time. Again, there are about 5.6 million small and micro businesses in the United States. 89% of them have fewer than 20 employees. These small shops still need, however, office, lab, or manufacturing space, but might not want or be able to own their space. So we're looking at how we can support co-working and incubator spaces where those companies can begin, as well as helping them find spaces and somewhere where they can grow. Two great examples is what's happening at Greentown Labs. This is the largest now clean tech incubator in North America. It's on Somerville Lab. We were able to get them here 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago from South Boston. There were 25 companies at the time. They've grown as many as 120. We helped them with their expansion. We gave them a loan through our innovation fund in exchange for creating jobs. They created more than 900 jobs. But some businesses have grown out of there, like L3, Voxel 8, right-hand robotics, which is expanded down to the old post office in Union Square and about to expand again. And also they're working incredible, important issues around climate change. We want to be the climate solution capital of the world, and we're going to ride this momentum with Greentown Labs. So again, work with them to expand that. Also another example is an Artisans Asylum. They are one of the world's largest maker spaces, and like Greentown, they offer alternative workspace. Artisan calculates that they've contributed, you can see here, about $30 million in local impact since they founded. But they didn't succeed in Somerville by chance. We've helped them locate and remain here, signed a lease. They're part of this incredible wave of fabricators, makers, artisans, sort of new era of manufacturing and sort of that creative economy right here in Somerville. And we've also donated used some of the high school machining equipment, and they're part of our efforts to think about a community innovation center right down here in Ward 4 in Gilman Square. But we're also, again, working to draw and support other new ways of working. We looked at our own regulations for home-based businesses and changed those so it's easier for people to work at home. We've also adopted in our proposed zoning artist and maker-friendly pieces of the zoning, and economic development, again, has expanded their programs beyond the traditional brick-and-mortar programs. There used to be a strong focus just on storefront improvement years ago. In other words, your entranceways, your lobbies, your storefront as an attractive way of increasing your base. But what we now offer is, for example, our active entrepreneur network, where small businesses, owners, and self-employed people can get together and network and share advice and best practices. And right now, between 75 to 80% of those member businesses are women and or are minority owned. So you've heard about some of the things that we're doing in support of small businesses, but it's also worth pointing out, this is not a spectator sport. What can we do individually when we shop locally? A greater percentage of that money stays in Somerville. As you know, local businesses, you can imagine, they hire people in the community, they may sponsor a local youth or community organization or sports team, get involved with our public schools, they get supplies locally, hire contracts locally, whether it's to do their electrical work or perhaps set up their business website. This chart again shows, for example, that when we shop at a chain retailer, only an estimated 13.6% of our dollars spent recirculate back in the local economy, but when we shop at an independent local retailer, nearly half of that stays here and recycles locally. Again, our local business and entrepreneurs do face challenges, like many do across the country, and we're working all fronts to support them. One positive indicator is that the number of Somerville businesses continues to grow consistently year after year. Just from 2012, as we're coming out of the Great Recession, to 2018, that number of net new businesses increased by roughly 23%. So it's about a net new 489 new businesses. Now, most of these are small or micro businesses, and that means less than 5 employees, including the owner. But cumulatively, they are really an economic engine that's supporting who we are here. They're really the foundation of our economic base here in Somerville and who we want to be. So this is when we all come in. This is when the more we can think about being loyal local to our local economy, the more successful they're going to be, and the more successful we're going to be as a city. So I know I went on long with all that information. I wanted to catch up. If I talk too fast, I apologize. I'm going to take a couple of questions before I pass it on, but I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to be right here. I'm going to right there, and then back to you, Ed. Yes?
I've lived in Somerville for 8 years, and I've come to a lot of these meetings, and I wanted to know what is happening with the revitalization of Winter Hill and the Star Market eyesore. It's terrible.
Sure, thank you. Are you going to be touching on that? Sue will be coming up when she comes. We'll give a breakdown about what we're doing and what's happening with the community right after me. So if we can hold that question. Ed, do you want to? Yeah.
I was told by someone at Kmart that the Kmart building was sold. I can only imagine if it was sold, they're not just going to put another retail store there, but maybe build something. Have you heard anything about what's happening over
Yes,
there?
you heard the Kmart is closing, and it's been the slowest sort of demise over the last 10 years of Kmart. Even Kmart was bought by Sears several years ago in the bankruptcy portfolio, and then they've been bailed out a couple of times by hedge funds. So it was a matter of time. So we see this as an opportunity. However, we are working. There are about 50 employees there. For them, that's an important lifeline with job fairs and connecting them to other opportunities in the city. So we are working on that. Kmart, that whole old Ford plant, original Assembly Square Mall and Marketplace is owned by Federal Realty Investment Trust. They are not going to backfill that with another retail tenant, big box tenant, nor do we want them to. The city is about, in the upcoming months, will be kicking off a master planning effort to master plan the remainder of Assembly. So when we did the original master plan, urban renewal plan, it's what you see being built right there, but what remains to be master planned, in other words, what we as a community expect to be developed there, is the Marketplace, the Home Depot, Old Circuit City site, and all those other small parcels moving up towards the Boston line. But what we are, and now Federal Realty still has their buildings coming out of the ground now. They got another 1 million square feet of probably commercial they're planning to build. So there's a while before the Marketplace happens, but when we kicked off the project in Assembly, we wanted to make sure that the leases in the Marketplace weren't long-term, 30, 40, 50 years out. Kmart leaving provides us an opportunity, and I'll tell you why. Kmart since 1980 was only paying $4.84 a square foot. $4, and you probably pay more in your apartment. $4.84 a square foot, and the rent never went up. So even though they went through these tribulations and concerns and bankruptcy, it was always as a valuable asset, but the model was fading away for many reasons. So the property owner, Federal Realty, is doing something we like. They're looking at these companies like the ones coming out of Greentown Labs, like Right Hand Robotics and some of these other technology companies that are starting in Somerville that now want to mature to a bigger size footprint, and that space isn't built yet in Somerville, and they want to create that environment right in the Kmart box. So we could see them dividing that up where you might have a company like a Right Hand Robotics or some other tech company that really formed by local entrepreneurs staying right here in Somerville and creating that atmosphere right down in Assembly. But they're not going to fill with another box retailer. And right now, there is nothing planned because the master plan isn't done from the community yet. But we're going to kick this off this year. I know it was a long answer, but I wanted to make sure I explained that. So we saw that coming. Well, we knew when they told us it was going to happen. And we said, I'm sorry, did I miss a question on your end? Okay. And the Kmart? So I want to repeat that. That's interesting. It's not true. But that's a good one. I want to hear it, that the casino bought the Kmart and they're going to put a golf course there. No. Now, I'm not saying they wouldn't want to do that. But I think it was confused because there was talk at the old Monsanto site next to the casino. You know where that Power Shopping Center? I don't know if that's even true, but I know at one point they were talking about that there, but I don't know on that one. But no, it's not coming to Assembly. No, not at all. No. Though we expect, with the master planning effort in Assembly, we expect a very robust entity of open space moving forward there. I'm going to take one more, and I'm going to step back. I'm not going anywhere. Yep. How are you?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emily. I live on Thurston Street. Thank you for being here tonight with us. My question was specifically in regards to your presentation. A lot of us, a lot of the events come to mind, Union Square, Davis Square, and specifically, where does the art spending and community social spaces fit in Ward 4? Especially as we're seeing our most visible section of Ward 4, the Broadway corridor, and the current headache that many of us were voicing earlier. Where would these events and this opportunity for the businesses and our social spaces fit along this corridor where, yes, we want to be this vibrant place where people come and they see all of us out and about and socializing. Right now the closest thing we have to that's probably Winter Hill Brewery. And, we have a lot of challenges of people getting in and out of there. You've got the post office right there. You've got a bank. We have a lot of vacant buildings. We have a vacant Walgreens. We've got the vacant Star Market. And I know that's going to be addressed, but just in terms of our corridor and our opportunities for this, if you could speak specifically to that.
Yeah, too. I think you mentioned Gilman Square also in the Broadway corridor. So it has to be, if we think of the characteristics of what those corridors and those areas will be, I mean, having that placemaking, having that open space has to be part of that plan. In terms of the station area plan, even what is originally thought of and planned in Gilman and what's evolving, I think we see that as a priority, and it should be. And the city is all behind that because it's going to be necessary for that square to be successful. And the same thing for Broadway, and the neighborhood and the corridor plans we talked about there, having that, I'm talking open space first, on the open space piece, having that place where people connect, and creating that place or that destination, that 24-hour sense of place in some sense. The arts program is the same. We will continue to pump and make a lot of investment in the arts, and we see that going hand in hand with the planning efforts and investments in those areas, in those neighborhoods, to unlock that opportunity, improve quality of life, unlock some economic opportunity, and really just bring that enrichment characteristic to both those areas. So I see it at the forefront of all those two planning efforts. It's not going to be a funding concern for the city. It's not going to be a hurdle at all. We got to come together about where we're going to be in those two areas, and we need to then execute there, and the city is ready to go on that. So, okay, thank you. Thank you for the time. I'm not going anywhere. I am going to hand it off to Sue Thomas. Sue Thomas from Economic Development. Sue, you'll address the question about Star Market too.
So I just have a quick note about parking. If you have a blue Hyundai Elantra with license plate 8720XH, it is blocking another vehicle. So if that is your vehicle, do let us know.
Looks like it's no one in this room. Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Thomas. I'm one of the senior planners within Economic Development under the Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development. One of the things that we do is spearhead the implementation process for both the neighborhood plan in Gilman Square as well as Winter Hill. And as Councilor Klingon had asked for a quick update, the neighborhood plan was completed in 2019, November of 2019, and we've been sort of going about how to start that implementation process. And we did that back in June of this past summer by really calling out to one of the concerns that was raised out in the plan about the real estate opportunities here, how to really activate Broadway, how to connect the community, and talk about some of those other programming elements. One of the hot topics, and unfortunately the individual had asked the question and had to leave, but Star Market was really the main topic of that conversation. We had a really good attendance. We really were asking the community in terms of how they felt about the property, what needed to be there, the types of uses, but also in terms of taking that property. And we had an overwhelming support to take that by either what is a tool called the demonstration plan or an urban renewal. We are now just sort of trying to better understand the next steps to really understand which tool is really what is the most beneficial to the community to sort of start that next step. And we hope to have a subsequent meeting soon to sort of give an update and sort of talk about next steps on that. Yes. So take it for eminent domain. So I'm here to tell you guys about something exciting, which we are calling Summer Voice. Oftentimes in everything that we do, we try to be transparent, we try to be inclusive and diverse in all of our policy decision making, trying to get the feedback that we can. And we almost have a meeting almost every night of the week throughout the community, throughout all sorts of projects. However, we are also a very densely populated community. We will have an entire room filled, and yet, folks have still said there are still folks missing in this room. There's still not enough diversity. There's not people who are representative of the demographics of the community, and that's a really hard gap to fill. And one of the asks that we've gotten from the community was, what are other ways we can do it? And we have sort of tried to listen, and we're hoping that this platform sort of allows for that opportunity for folks who may either feel intimidated by coming to meetings, whether they have, quite frankly, don't have time within their work schedule, their personal life, and then to really have that community component to it. We really want to empower the community to have that collaborative discussion online, to really bring that democracy online and to truly have one equal voice. And we're using this platform as that. Right now, the projects that we have online, which is Gilman Square implementation process, the Winter Hill implementation process, and the last meeting notes, the feedback, all of the sort of exercises we have are all on this website. This allows you to provide the feedback. In the case that you cannot attend a public meeting, this is really the feedback portal. And you will have direct contact information for the staffers that are working on that. Although we are all in one department, we all have a specific role in each part of that community. So that's really what we wanted to introduce, and more or less, you guys are the first to see this. It's kind of a soft launch. The bad news of that is we get to hear sort of the technical issues of that and how things that we get to fix, which is okay. So that's more the reason why we would love for you to visit this page, register, and give us your honest feedback, participate in the activities that we do have on there, like pin-up boards, giving us your votes on things, giving us images of programming that you'd like to see in the square, etc. And registration is an important tool on this because that gives us an idea of where the feedback is coming from. We're a data-driven city, and we want to make sure that the feedback we get is measurable. So that will allow us to see, who's responding, what age range, where they're from, things like that. One of the other topics that is on this website is also about Foss Park. The long-awaited meeting for the discussions around the programming is happening on October 30th, 6:30 to 8 at the Healey School, as well as November 13th. Both of these meetings are the same meetings. They will cover the same topics, but they're giving you an opportunity to attend both. Foss Park is one of our second largest open space in Somerville. It constitutes for 7% of our open space. It is owned by DCR, the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, for state and local uses. They dedicated, I believe, $1.2 million for changes, infrastructure changes, for drainage issues, for multi-use turf uses, and that's what this meeting's about. And the folks that are going to be in the room is your state rep, Mike Connolly, Senator Pat Jalen, Mayor Curtatone, as well as your councilors, Jesse Klingon, Matt McLaughlin, and others, to really hear your feedback as to what needs to happen here. And state officials will be there. So we've been talking about this. This is one of the issues even in the neighborhood plan that really asks for a lot of programming and changes, quite frankly. So we really would urge you to attend that meeting as well. Do you have any questions? No, a neighborhood plan is outside of the zoning. So neighborhood plan is essentially your local vision for your specific area. So you're talking about, businesses, whether it's open space, whether it's real estate, really how to revitalize that area or even sustain what is there for the net long range plan, which is 7 to 10 years. Zoning is really your implementation tool. That's your regulations of how to make that happen. Yes.
Listed under Summer Voice now. The slide you had before had there's two things up there? Or is there three? There's Foss Park and these two?
I just couldn't fit everything on the slides, but yes, there's multiple. There's an accessibility forum, there's Gilman Square, Winter Hill, Foss Park feedback. Those are the things that are live right now. We'll be adding more initiatives.
Can we add Winter Hill in Motion? I know that there's a big section on the website. Could we add that one as one of the ones? Because I think that would be a good vehicle for us to get a lot of the feedback that was coming in earlier in the meeting today. I would welcome that, unless you have it already listed under the Winter Hill Plan and Implementation.
We don't just yet, because they've been using their own platforms, but that's a great suggestion. We can put that on there. One of the purposes for this is that we don't want it to be like a depository of things. We want it to have like a beginning, middle, and an end where you know that there's a process for feedback and when it ends and where that goes. Okay. So we will definitely talk to mobility to see what we can do to get that on the site.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be an awesome vehicle to get a lot of the feedback that we were hearing earlier today.
Sure. Yes.
We're basically starting from scratch with what we're going to do there because there were signs for the turf field. They came down. It hasn't happened. As far as I know, there wasn't public input into the turf field. So is this to get feedback for what we want?
I wish I had the answer for you, and I'm looking around the room for Brad, which he said that he could answer. So it's coming out of our open space mobility shop. The question was adding more feedback in terms of turf versus grass, or is this just more conversations around the turf field itself and the types of uses that would go on it?
About Foss Park. Okay, so the state is building the turf field at Foss Park. That's moving forward. The community, what we try to respond to is The state is not master planning the rest of Foss Park, so we're using local funds and efforts and resources and working with our state delegation to lay out what we expect for Foss Park. You know, what are the, how we address accessibility, lighting, improving the other park features, what do we want to add to it? Because we're going to have to push hard to DCR to get the rest of it done. But if we wait for them, they just changed the commissioner again. If we wait for them to do that, that's never going to happen. So we heard from the community that we want to undertake a visioning process, what the community wants, much like the implementation plan process in neighborhoods, that this is what we want for the park. And then we will push on that with our delegation to get it done by the state. Make sense? That's what the meeting will be. Thank you. That's the state's field, yeah. That's the Model T conversation that the commissioner had with folks before. Yeah.
Yes.
During the registration process, it confirms that we're actually a Somerville resident, so we're not like accidentally like having people from Everett or Medford like get on there and voice their concerns and change kind of, it'll make us like put in an actual street address or register us.
So we didn't go along with the street address. If you were to sign in, it'll ask you whether you're a resident in Somerville or if you're a worker, because you don't have to live here in order to provide that. You could also be working here and provide your feedback as well as a stakeholder in the community. We did take a look at the address point, and we may do that in the future, but we really don't want to defer folks from actually providing input.
Okay. Okay. I just could see like other local, people who live in other local communities like using it to pump up their...
So the registration is based on one of your emails, but there's also a series of sort of a short list of questions that will help us to determine where you're in. So it'll ask you what neighborhood you're living or working in, sort of demographics and other questions that we have on there. We're hoping that that information is enough, and also professional background, because we'd like to know, you know, where your comments are coming from. That will be very insightful for us as well. But again, it's optional. So while that's definitely a great comment, you know, again, it goes back to inclusivity. We just want to grab comments as much as we can from everyone. But again, residents and stakeholders in Somerville obviously is priority. Yes.
Will the project for Blessings of the Bay and Shore Drive be on that as well?
We're still building out our list of projects on here. We're just trying to figure it out on the back end in terms of the software itself, but we have put it out there. If there's departments or projects that are looking for feedback right now, we will put it out there. Again, that is why this is a soft launch. Once we have this sort of figured out in its entirety with all of the features it has, we will do a full citywide launch and also include some of those other projects. Yes.
When you do the full launch, how do you plan on having everyone in Somerville know about Summer Voice, so that people who aren't here or don't regularly check Somerville website actually know about it and know that there's a venue or a platform for them to voice their concerns?
Part of it are the people that are sitting in this room. I really want you guys to send this out and to tell folks that, hey, if you can't come to the meeting, go on this website for updates, but also our city website. This does not replace our city website for more information. But for the technical answer, we do have a full, robust communications team. We'll put it out on social media. We have Summer Viva, which is our translation services. We'll have this translated. You'll also notice on the page, it has translation, Google Translate. It's not the greatest for documents per se, but if folks are interested, we do have those services available at City Hall to provide to you, and we'll be, putting it out in that sense, and also through community notes. So each area and your counselors will definitely know about it as well, and they'll blast it out as much as we can. That's the best we will do, but we also plan to do block walking as well for various different efforts, because we know that that goes a long way as well. Thank you, and I'm going to give to Taylor for more updates.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, I know it's getting late into the evening. Thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate your patience. I'm going to go as quickly as I can through some quick updates just about the city in general and about the ward. So our Summer Vision 2040 committee has been hard at work to draft topic chapters. These chapters are available for public review, and we do hope to hear your feedback. This public review period is open until November 1st, so that's coming up soon. If you would like to submit feedback, you can visit somerville.civiccomment.org/summervision, or you can email planning@somervillema.gov. For more information on Summer Vision 2040, we also have a Summer Vision website, summervision2040.com. And Summer Baby is a great program offered by the city. It is a universal, free, and multilingual home visiting program to welcome our newest residents, our newborns, with the best start in life by providing connections to resources as well as a few gifts such as the Welcome Baby Bag. We do have this information printed out on the table if you are expecting a child soon or if you know of another family that has a newborn all the way up to 1 year old. We do offer some other programs, including a Spanish language prenatal class, as well as some other programs for young babies that are up to 3 years old, and that information is also printed out on the table, and these slides will be available online. Our lead service line replacement program has received new funds. If your residence is serviced by a non-copper or lead line, you can check at somervillema.gov/lead services. If it does turn out that your property is serviced by a lead or non-copper water service line, it is possibly eligible to be replaced free of charge. To submit an application that will be considered for replacement in the spring of next year, we do encourage you to submit those applications by December of this year. For more information on this, you can contact the engineering department at extension 5400, and if you do have questions, we have Director of Engineering Jess Fosbrook here to answer any questions that you may have about this. So our Office of Sustainability and Environment is encouraging us to just rethink about our reusable and recyclable materials. We are seeing recycling in the news a lot, and we are trying to be very careful about contamination. Really, we're thinking about two types of contamination. The first one is a little bit more subtle. Many of you probably use our zero sort cart at home, which just means that many different types of recyclable materials can go in there. If you do end up contaminating that recycling cart with materials that cannot be recycled, it does really slow down the process and can drive up the cost overall. Another type of contamination includes food and liquids. So if you've ever wondered if it really matters if you just rinse out, an almost empty coffee cup or maybe yogurt container, it does really end up speeding up the process for sorting those materials and can keep other materials such as paper or cardboard clean as that process goes along. So the things that we do want to continue to recycle include clean metal, glass, rigid plastic, as well as paper containers, and also clean paper and cardboard. Things that may not be so intuitive to not recycle include plastic bags, plastic wrapper film. Those materials can get stuck in the sorting machines. And as I mentioned earlier, anything with food on that, we want to continue to not recycle those materials. We do have a great tool called the Waste Wizard, which helps to just double check if materials are recyclable in the sort system that we use. So if you're ever unsure, we do encourage you to take a look at that tool. The Healey Schoolyard, we are preparing to renovate. So we had a meeting earlier this month on October 10th. If you were unable to make that meeting, it was recorded and it will be on the Healey Schoolyard website, on the city website. So the Green Line Extension project is on schedule to open by the end of 2021. In order to make this project possible, we have had to close some bridges. So the Broadway Bridge is on track to reopen in March of next year. The Washington Street Bridge is now expected to be closed throughout the winter, but will be opening in April of 2020 instead of in the fall. The Medford Street Bridge will reopen in late spring of 2020, and then we are expecting the School Street Bridge to be closed in early spring of next year as well. Our next public meeting for this is in November of this year, so stay tuned for more details on that. The information will be posted on the city website. So we understand that this has been a very trying time. We do appreciate your patience and your feedback through this process. We are doing our best to remain vigilant regarding traffic management and do have an interdepartmental team dedicated to working with our state partners on this. So we do have people from fire, police, mobility, engineering, traffic and parking, communications, as well as other staff. And we do take a three-pronged approach to this, which includes advanced planning, daily monitoring, as well as rapid response. Some efforts include the Reboot Your Commute campaign that we worked on with the GLX team. So we sent communications materials out to 96 neighboring cities and towns, 84 media outlets, 29 medical facilities, 26 colleges, as well as large employers in the area. If you do have concerns regarding traffic or detours, we do encourage you to continue reporting them through 311 or emailing construction@somervillema.gov. There are multiple ways to stay informed about the Green Line Extension project. The Mass DOT website at mass.gov/glx has some really great information and updates. We also offer a construction newsletter and have a construction website that has some updates as well. And then if you are not subscribed already, we do encourage you to subscribe to city alerts as well as the city newsletter. All right, so I'm going to hand things over to Chief Breen from Somerville Fire Department. And he's going to talk about response times as well as some career opportunities.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging in. I know it's been a long night. I have a brief presentation tonight. It's going to concentrate on emergency responses for the past 6 months, which I call the construction period from April to September. And I'm going to give a plug on a career open house that we'll be having. Although my presentation's brief, I just want to state that the planning that took place by the fire department for the bridge closures and the Union Square construction was anything but brief. Myself and my staff analyzed a lot of data on response routes and response times, made a lot of changes to response plans and different apparatus that were going to respond to different areas, and try to attempt to lessen the impact that our responses were going to be hit with because of all the construction going on. I entered into an agreement with the fire chief in Cambridge for the West Somerville area. We get an automatic response out of the Porter Square Fire Station for anything west, and for anything east, I worked with the Boston fire chief, and we have an automatic response out of the Sullivan Square Station in Charlestown coming up to mitigate any delays. We also have an extra engine in service Monday through Friday from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, which is the heavy traffic period. That sits down on New Washington Street behind the Holiday Inn. And that's been a great help for us because we don't have any fire stations beyond the Washington Street Bridge. As you can see, the response times for the past 6 months this year, despite the closure of the Washington Street Bridge, the Ball Square Bridge, the Medford Street Bridge, and Union Square's Big Dig, our response times are actually 3 seconds faster than they were the same time last year. And I have to give a lot of credit to the men and women of the department that are out there driving the apparatus, responding to calls. They're following our plans, and they've been doing a great job, and it's shown that our planning has worked. I also, as Taylor said, the dates on the bridges when they open, believe me, nobody's going to be happier when they open besides me. And I got selfish reasons. One, I live in Ward 6 on the opposite side of the Ball Square Bridge. And for me, it used to be a nice quick drive for me to get to headquarters from my house. Now I have a serpentine route that I have to take before I can get my coffee in Magoon Square before I get to work. And my wife drives my daughter to the high school every morning, and I get an earful on quite a few mornings from her when she's trying to make her way up to the high school sitting in traffic. I have to give a lot of credit to also interdepartment cooperation. I couldn't do it by myself. When we did the plans, I was meeting daily with Brad Rawson. I'm on the phone with Chief Fallon, the police department, all the time when we were having issues with congestion in certain areas, and we all work together to try to work things out. Also, I get a report every morning when I go to work on the past 24-hour responses. Any excessive responses are flagged. We delve into why was there a delay, and sometimes it's a simple thing that I talked to the officer, we get hung up on a corner due to parking conditions. I work with traffic and parking, and we work to alleviate those problems. So we're very pleased with the response times. I also want to talk briefly on, we've been seeing a troubling trend the last couple of years on the amount of people that are taking the fire exam. The numbers are plummeting, and it's a concern to us. Obviously, the less people that take the exam, the less pool of candidates we have. We're also concerned about diversity. We live in a diverse city. We want the fire department to reflect that diversity. The less people that take the exam, the less diverse candidates that are on the list. We've been working closely with the personnel department. We recently filmed 3 videos, one in Spanish, one in Portuguese, one in Haitian Creole. Firefighters from those communities were in the videos, and they did the videos in their languages. We've been visiting faith-based and community organizations in the city for the last couple of months, trying to get the word out. There's going to be an exam in March, I believe March 21st of 2020, and we're trying to get the word out to as many people as we can. You have to be a resident of the city to take the exam, and you have to be 19 years of age as of the time of the test, which is in March. So we really like to get the word out that we're having a career open house on November 16th from 10 to noon at fire headquarters. We're going to have a bunch of diverse firefighters there explaining the job and giving information about the exam coming up. And if you know anyone that you think might be a good candidate for the fire department, we'd love to have them come down. And if they can't make it, reach out to Jennifer Mancia at the personnel department, and she can provide all kinds of information as well. That's it for my presentation. If anybody has any fire-related questions, I'd love to be able to answer them. If not, I'm going to pass it off to Jess Fosbrook, talk about some flooding, and I'll be here at the end of the night if anybody thinks of any questions that you want to talk to me about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. I'm here to talk about recent flooding. We've had a really intense summer of rainstorms, and that combined with aging infrastructure has created problems in a lot of areas of our city and Ward 4 and other places. I will note that we are having a meeting about flooding for Richdale Ave this coming Tuesday. I would invite people, if you live on streets that also experience severe flooding issues, to come to that as well. So that's Tuesday. I don't have a slide. Tuesday at 6:30 at the Somerville High School auditorium. And I can give you more details on that afterwards if you'd like as well. So this is part of a series of infographics that we made that we'll be releasing. And so this one has a couple of bullets about what the city is doing about flooding. And so I'm going to talk briefly about our system maintenance, infrastructure projects, and community outreach as well. So this was a photo sent to us by a resident on Richdale Ave from a storm this summer. So it's a significant issue. So it's a citywide concern for various reasons. Public safety and health, property damage is a big concern as well. And it's also an environmental concern in the form of combined sewer overflows to our surrounding waterways. So there are a number of weather events, types of weather events that are linked to flooding. And so one way that some areas of the city can experience flooding is by coastal flooding. And so this is in the form of storm surge, such as you might have heard of in New York City during Hurricane Sandy. And then we have a variety of different types of precipitation-based flooding, so when it rains. So for instance, there are long duration storms of sustained rainfall, and this is what these are the types of storms that our system was designed to a long time ago, because this was the typical rainstorm that would come. We also can experience flooding on city streets when snow is melting, and perhaps our ice or snow has blocked the catch basins, and then all of a sudden it's raining and melting the snow, and it's inundating the system. And then what's been especially problemsome are these short bursts of intense rain, which are becoming increasingly common as climate change is hitting the Northeast, and we'll continue to see this.
And so we've actually seen more of these types of rainfall events in 2019 than in any other year in the past 10 years. And so we received a lot of constituent reports, and we were able to tag that up with NOAA rainfall data and take a look at what type of rain event in Somerville contributes to especially lots of hotspots and issues on our city streets. So what is the city doing? So there's during a flood event, and then there's after the flood events, and kind of our ongoing capital improvements. So during a flood event, if 311 is received, the sewer dispatches crews to respond to reports of active flooding. They'll assess basin and system condition, and if possible, they'll disperse any floodwaters. After flood events, we have a new email list that if you want to send us reports of flooding after the event, it's going to be flooding@somervillema.gov, and we'll collect those and make sure that these are areas that we have that we already have tagged on our city's hydraulic model, which is something I'll touch on in a moment. So why is this happening? So one reason is that our pipes were made primarily a long time ago when we had a certain density of development, and so that's changed over the years. There are geographical reasons as well. Some parts of the city are lower than others, and some parts of the city are kind of farther down in the pipe system as well. Pipe condition is a critical piece of this as well. I mentioned our aging infrastructure. Catch basin condition is also something that without regular cleaning and maintenance, flows can't reach the pipes. So these are areas of active attention from us in terms of the water and sewer crews, cleaning catch basins regularly, and then engineering has had a lot more funding in recent years to be able to actually TV and look at how our pipes are doing, and then to do capital improvements in various areas of our system as well. And then I've already mentioned some of the issues related with climate change and intense rains in our area. So we've got a lot of attention on these fixes. So we've got the major work going on down on Somerville Ave. We're also about to do some cleaning of the marginal interceptor, which runs alongside Foss Park under the road. And so that's a major pipe that's been in disrepair for a long time that we're doing some heavy cleaning on, and then we'll be doing a major lining operation to ensure that pipe is in good shape for another 50 plus years to come. So we've also undergone an extensive flood mapping exercise, and so this has flushed out the hydraulic model for our city in a lot of detail so that we can actually start to run scenarios of, okay, we're seeing flooding in certain areas, what if we fix this, or what if we improve a pipe there, and we haven't had this level of detail before. And then we have a series of flood maps. This is a very worst case map that I've got shown up here for Ward 4. So this is looking at a 100-year rain event. We've also tagged it to climate change conditions. So this is looking at 2070 projected climate change conditions, and also looking at sea level rise on top of those as well. So this is going to be available in the city's GIS viewer, and you'll be able to kind of tag through various types of storms and look at your neighborhoods. So in the meantime, in addition to all this, the bigger projects that we're doing, we have a variety of ways that we're communicating. Like if there is a major storm like a Hurricane Sandy or something like that hits our area, how are ways that you can be prepared? And so these are a series of infographics that we've developed in various languages that we'll be releasing as well. All right. I think that's the end of everything, but happy to take questions related to flooding, or if anyone has questions about the lead service line replacement as well, I can answer that.
I'm not sure that that's the most efficient way.
Sure, so if it's an issue that you're seeing, like, a catch basin is looking blocked, things like that. Yeah, Yeah, 311 is a good way to look at that. But there's only so much they can do because a lot of times that the rain events subside so quickly that, yes, it's a big issue that it happens, but it does subside quickly, so they may not have gotten out in time. But those do get tagged and looked at.
We had that intersection, because I live right on the corner of Jake's and Wheatland, and that flooded in 2015. I remember because I was pregnant, and it was like significant. And then it didn't happen again until this summer, and I saw your graph where it's happening more significantly, but it probably happened almost 20 times this summer. Like, we couldn't leave our house if we knew it was gonna rain because it was that severe. Like, I have pictures from the 311 app I could pull up. And they're also doing something, I can talk to you afterwards, something with the drain there, which I've tried to call about, and I left like a very detailed message, but haven't heard back what's happening with that sewer there.
Sure, yeah, our sewer crews have been doing some work in that area, so kind of maintenance level upgrades. And so that is something that we hope will help, but we also definitely need to look at some more major improvements in that area as well. Yeah, I'm not familiar exactly what they're doing over on Jake Street, but yeah, I'll look into that.
Hi, my name is Nancy. And in terms of flooding, I'm concerned about the loss of permeable ground. I know I live on Browning Road, and it's right behind Central. And I was just at a meeting the other week about the development of Catholic Charities. And as it is right now, the water runs right off Central down into my neighbor's basements and onto Browning Road. And they want to double the size of the building, taking away green space, as well as making 8 parking spaces. So anecdotally, I've heard from friends that they keep their green space in their backyard, but all their neighbors have paved for parking, and so all the water rushes there. So I don't know if there's anything the city can do to regulate the amount of paving, because I think that's going to become more of a problem when the water can't soak into the ground.
Yeah, definitely. So any development happening today and in the recent past, anytime that people are looking to increase, take away permeable space and pave things over, they have to provide space for that water to go. So in the terms of underground storage and whatnot, I can't comment, I don't know the specifics of that development, but anything coming through the pipeline today is subject to requirements of not being allowed to take away space without providing space for the water to go.
Some catch basins, but someone who's at the meeting, who's a landscape designer and architect, thought that those were insufficient. I'm sure it's going through the proper channels, but it is a problem as it is, and I can only see it getting worse if they're allowed to go forward with their plan. So thank you.
Catholic Charities, yeah, and they're trying to go from underneath, I believe the minimum's 35% permeable, and they're trying to go to 16% to get a variance, and that's a huge difference. It's less than 50% for the neighborhood.
Is there any talk about potential like breaks for taxpayers, like for if we need to repave our driveway and we could consider putting in pavable stone instead, which I think helps as providing more of a porous surface, but that's usually more expensive than the typical just bring in the crew to do the blacktop. Are there any like options where programs that we could start up that would maybe offset that cost a little bit for those of us to kind of, or would that cause other problems if there's too much of that?
Sure, yeah, so our recent regulations actually do require some amount of permeable. I believe it's the first 10 feet of new driveways. But on a larger scale, in terms of how we bill for water and sewer, we are investigating how we bill for stormwater within that. So, looking at areas large paved over landowners contribute more than, say, a few family house to stormwater runoff. So And within that, there could be incentives for people to reduce the amount of impermeable surfaces on their properties. So that's something we're very actively looking into.
My question is about the lead pipe project, and it said lead and non-copper. So does that mean basically if it's not a copper pipe, I believe I have a ceramic pipe going out to the water flow?
Sure,
So
yeah,
would
so
that-
the state-of-the-art is a copper service line between the water main and your home. So our priorities, we're going to be doing this over a number of years. So the priorities will be to replace the lead lines, which have kind of the largest known health impacts. And some of the other ones don't have the level of health impacts potential as lead. So we'll be saving those for later years, but we do want to see all of those replaced to copper eventually. So feel free to put your name in the hat for the program, but you may get bumped, say, until perhaps 2021 or later.
For the turf field at Foss Park, how does that connect to permeable surface? So is there a robust plan from the state for what's happening in Foss Park? I'm not an expert on turf fields, but I would have to assume water doesn't go through them.
Sure, yeah, I can't speak specifically to Foss Park, but those types of systems are designed with drainage so that, kids can still play soccer in rainstorms. Obviously not, Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
And then they filled it in. My husband is a historian. He says they filled it in because of, what was it? It was he just was saying, it was some disease risk. He was they were
Okay.
afraid and they filled it in. But of course, it floods because that's what type of land it is. And now we're working against it.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I can't speak to the specifics of Foss Park in terms of.
Worse. They got to put in new drains.
Okay. All right. Anything else for Taylor? Taylor, you want to close us out?
All right, that's all. These slides will be posted online. Thank you for sticking with us. Have a great night.